let's get recognition that traumatic brain injury deserves attention. The World Health Organization is the organization that can help achieve that on the world stage. And until now, it has not gotten distinct attention within our World Health Organization.
There is always hope, and you are not alone.
Welcome to Hope Survives, a podcast from the Hope Survives nonprofit supporting individuals and families navigating life with brain injury. I'm your host, Cristabelle Braden. After my own experience with traumatic brain injury, including multiple re-injuries, I've learned how isolating this road can feel and how hard it can be to find a way forward. No one should have to walk it alone. On this show, we explore the realities of life with brain injury through encouragement, thoughtful conversations, expert insights, and real stories. No matter where you are on your journey, remember, you're never alone, and hope survives.
With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives. Hope survives. Hope survives.
Hey friends, welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. Today we have a very relevant conversation about how brain injury is being perceived throughout the world and the future of what that will look like with the World Health Organization's initiative for brain injury. We have someone here today, Paul Dubetz, who has been part of creating the resolution and initiative that is being presented to the World Health Assembly. The 79th World Health Assembly will be held in Geneva, Switzerland, starting in May 18th, 2026, so just coming up this week. The World Health Assembly is the World Health Organization's decision-making body, and it brings together member states from all over the world to set global health policies, approve programs and budgets, and address major issues of health impacts and more. And we have someone today, Paul Dubetz, who's been part of creating the brain injury side of this. Up until now, the World Health Organization has not done much with brain injury nor acknowledged it, even though it affects people all over the world. And now that is starting to change. These are current conversations that are happening, and it's so exciting to hear more about. Paul is also a person who has had a brain injury himself, and today he is both going to share his personal story of going through brain injury, how the World Health Organization resolution has been coming about, what things are going to be talked about at the World Health Assembly, and why it's important. So this is a very encouraging conversation, and we are looking forward to welcoming Paul T. Dubetz to Hope Survives podcast. To share a little bit of background about him, Paul started his working career with Mobil Oil Corporation as a petroleum engineer in the United States. Since that time, he's worked in various technical, financial, and managerial capacities for Mobil and ExxonMobil in exploration and production, supply and trading, corporate finance, and gas and power marketing. During his 34 years, Paul and his family lived and worked throughout the U.S. in London, Singapore, Indonesia, Qatar, Italy, and most recently, Iraq. Following his retirement from ExxonMobil, Paul was appointed as an adjunct assistant professor in the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at The Ohio State University to support the introduction of petroleum engineering to the curriculum. He designed and teaches a class covering project evaluation with attention giving to international nature of the energy industry and managing uncertainty. Paul incurred a traumatic brain injury in 2010 while living and working in Italy. As a survivor, he became active in presenting his case and advocating for attention and action on TBI. Paul has joined the Brain Injury Association of America and linked with a global coalition to progress the adoption of a resolution by the World Health Organization recognizing TBI as a notifiable and chronic condition. In addition to his organizational responsibilities, Paul has a strong link to community and public service. He's served as a Mobil Oil Corporation lead representative for fundraising with United Way in New Orleans, president of the Board of Trustees for the American School of Milan, Italy, and chairman of the Management Committee for the Boy Scouts of America in Milan. We are so excited to welcome Paul to today's podcast and to go deeper into talking about what is happening on the world stage of brain injury. Before we get into the conversation, we want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, the Functional Neurology Center. The FNC offers personalized neuro recovery programs for anyone going through brain injury and a wide range of neurological conditions. When you trust your brain to the team at the Functional Neurology Center, they take the time to get to know the whole you so they can personalize your recovery program for your unique and complex condition. There is hope for a better tomorrow, and the FNC is committed to helping you get back what matters most. Visit thefnc.com for more. And with that, let's get into today's interview. Today, I am so excited to welcome Paul Dubetz to the Hope Survives podcast. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure to be here, Cristabelle.
We're so looking forward to hearing from you. And before we get into today's topic, talking about the World Health Organization Global Initiative for Brain Injury, can you share a little bit of who you are and your background?
Sure. As Cristabelle said, name is Paul Dubetz. I spent my working career in the oil and gas industry, working around the world. And in fact, that's part of the story I'm about to tell. 25 of my 35 years of work were in Asia, in the Middle East, or in Europe, and gave me a perspective on the global field and the global nature of how we live, and the importance of coordination within and amongst global entities. And that's part of the story as well that I'd like to talk about. And actually, let me start by saying a few words about, right now, I happen to live and reside in Cleveland, Ohio, following my retirement from the industry. And I came here because this is where I originated a long time ago and went to undergraduate school and so on. So I now return to this location. And I have an opportunity to give back what I learned, not only with cases like this that I'm participating in, but with teaching at the university as well. And all of these themes come together in that way. So by virtue of the topic and the subject today, let me give you a little bit of background about myself and traumatic brain injury. Because like I mentioned, I was working much of my career outside the United States. And in fact, in 2010, I was located in Italy, in Milan, living and working, along with my family, my wife and two children, who were both going to high school there in Milan. And what I remember is on February the 26th, 2010, I remember leaving the office and making a call to my wife at home saying I was on the way home, as I routinely would do. The next memory that I have was lying in bed in mid-April of that year in a location I did not know, feeling stiff physically, not sore, but stiff. Having a tube in my throat, tracheotomy, seeing double, and my head feeling kind of odd. I tried to stand up, but I could not. What had occurred in Milan, Italy, that day, February the 26th, is part of a remarkable story. I was an American living in Italy with my family on assignment there. And on the way home from work that day, I incurred a common communication breakdown in the world we live in when crossing a street, a breakdown that changed my life. I saw an oncoming car with the driver as I was about to cross the street, and the driver saw me. I initially hesitated before crossing the street, thinking, well, he was moving and I shouldn't be crossing. And then I saw that he had slowed down. So, in fact, I then said, okay, he's going to stop. I started to cross. He, on the other hand, saw me, saw that I had hesitated, and decided, well, he's not going to walk across the street. I'm going to move forward. And we had a collision. I was struck by that car and thrown into a median in between lanes on the road and incurred a very serious head injury. One of the remarkable parts about the story, I think, is that the only thing that I incurred was a head injury. I had no damage or strain on the body, no broken bones, no bruises, no bleeding, other than, as I read later in a police report, blood coming from the ears. And I was unconscious on the street. The other remarkable part about the story is that this incident was witnessed. It was witnessed by an emergency worker, services worker, who was on her way to work, saw the accident, had an immediate feeling that there was a serious head injury that's being incurred here, and immediately made contact with an institute in Milan, Italy, called the Niguarda Hospital, which happens to be one of the leading areas of treatment of brain injury in Europe, in not just Italy. So that's a piece of good fortune, one of the first pieces of good fortune leading to many other pieces of good fortune in this story. And so not long after the incident itself, after contact had been made with this institute, a group of neurosurgeons were in an ambulance on their way to the site to begin preparing me once they diagnosed for brain surgery. And that is what happened on that day. I was immediately taken to that institute and underwent brain surgery, the first of two. So it's a remarkable story in that regard, in the sense of the nature of the accident itself. But it continues in the sense that, as you can imagine, no knowledge was gained by my wife or family as to what had happened, only that I didn't get home. And yet there was a feeling of something is not right and not good. And the search was undertaken by my wife in a foreign environment, in a foreign language, to try to find out what had happened. And ultimately, she did. She learned that I had been in an accident and that I had to, I was undergoing some surgeries and the location where this was happening.
Wow, that's a lot.
Well, it is a lot that happened
Yeah.
in really just a very few minutes, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, she traveled to this site with the help of local friends that we had. Of course, she was greeted by not good news, by a message being, he's incurred a serious accident, he's in surgery, we cannot predict whether he will make it or not, and if he does, we cannot predict the nature of his condition. And that, as many of you who have experienced traumatic brain injury, is a common diagnosis when such an accident can occur. And that's what happened to me. If anyone is familiar with the Glasgow scale, which is a measure used to indicate the severity of a brain injury, your responsiveness, with the levels of 3 at the very bottom up to 15 for less serious incidents, she was told I was given a diagnosis of a nut between 3 and 4. That was my condition at the time. Not particularly good news at all. But I underwent surgery, as I had mentioned, and as is also common for anybody familiar with such an injury, had craniotomy, portions of the skull removed in order to get access to the brain, which had been diagnosed with bleeding, and to help control pressure in the head. And I had one done on one side of my head where I initially struck the median in the road, the side of the injury itself, and the surgery was performed. Then I was in regular checking mode or treatment, and in so doing, they detected that there was an aneurysm forming on the opposite side of the head, probably linked to the accident itself, not the area of direct impact, but of course the brain moves dramatically in such an incident, and such a thing can happen. So they had to undergo a second surgery for me on the other side of the head, again with a craniotomy to remove that side of the skull and operate to correct that aneurysm, which they successfully did. So that was my state. I was lying in that state with two sides of my skull removed for a period of time while I was in a coma. And this one thing, again, unique and perhaps unique about the treatment of the pieces of skull that were removed is typically, certainly in the US, typically in other places, those are either discarded to be replaced by manufactured replacement pieces, or perhaps put in the freezer to try to keep it usable to be replaced when they can be replaced. In my case, and this was technique that was utilized there, they inserted it into my midsection to keep them living, let's say. And so I had two portions of my skull that I carried in my midsection until they were able to be replaced back in the areas where they had been taken from. I almost walked around like having an armor because I could feel
Wow,
this
that's
difference
that
on
must have
me.
felt so strange.
Well, very strange. But of course, initially I felt nothing because I was
Hmm.
in a coma, and I was in a
Yeah.
coma for a period of 5 weeks until that memory in mid-April when I was conscious and in the bed.
How long
And
ago did this happen?
this was in 2010, so this was 15
Okay.
years ago. But I think that's the important part of the story where it really does continue. The first thing
Mhm.
I want to say is while trauma for traumatic brain injury is associated, as it should be, with the person who was injured, it should equally be associated with the caregivers. In my case, my family, wife, whatever, who for that 5 to 6 week period had to manage the drama. I was part of the drama, but I wasn't conscious during it.
Yeah, you were in a coma.
I was in a coma.
Yeah.
And so I could not have to relate to the seriousness, to the uncertainty associated with that. But again, anyone who has had such an injury and caregivers around them know what I'm talking about. And this will ultimately get toward the subject that we talked about, Cristabelle, of the World Health Organization resolution and action, but a recognition that traumatic brain injury is a condition that not only affects the injured, but affects those around them, and
Hmm.
and is a chronic injury, chronic condition that extends itself for a long time, sometimes for the rest of each person's life. And that's the nature of the story that I'm part of. I think what I'll just highlight now is recovery, because I did regain consciousness. And what I do remember, and this is an important message, I think, in anything, is my mindset was not negative, was not depressed, was not something my life is not going to be the same. It was of a different nature. It was, and that's why I make reference to Hope Survives in this organization. It was a matter of positive thinking, of I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm something's amiss, but let's take let's see where this all leads, and having a positive approach to doing it. And I think one of my primary messages around traumatic brain injury is the importance of positive thinking and openness in thinking in when it comes to recovery. And I think that had a lot to do with what was termed by the neurosurgical team at one time a miraculous recovery, in my case, from what I had incurred. Positive thinking is critical to taking those steps. And the other thing that became clear to me as I got to experience it was the quote unquote new normal that is associated with recovery from a traumatic brain injury. The differences in thinking or emotion or interaction or whatever. And I think one of the key areas of positive and success associated with my recovery was my ability to recognize not everything's the same, but I'm here and moving forward in that regard and utilizing it and, let's say, navigating it in such a way that people may not recognize that I'm a little bit different than I was before, because I conduct and can behave in such a way that looks normal. And so I think it's an important aspect, the new normal, and recognizing it, accepting it, and it can take many variations. I'm certainly not suggesting that all traumatic brain injury recoveries can be as miraculously positive as mine, but they can move forward.
And it's one step at a time. And
Absolutely.
that's really what we do at Hope Survives. We walk alongside people and their families, as you mentioned, because it does affect everyone, right? And so to be able to take that one step forward in hope. And thank you so much for sharing some of your story. And I know that there's so many more pieces than we have time to talk about here, but I really appreciate you sharing some of what you've learned through your brain injury recovery and how you have been able to come forward with it. So I would love to ask, how did you get involved in the World Health Organization initiatives? And I'd love to hear some of that story. And then I would love to talk about what the initiative is and how that will affect people with brain injury.
Sure. Happy to do that. So when I ultimately retired from my working career, I returned to Ohio and started on the faculty at the Ohio State University, my alma mater, actually. And I learned at that time that there was a program, a chronic brain injury program on at the university associated with this traumatic brain injury and coordinating communication within the university itself. But I also learned and was linked up with a global coalition, an organization of primarily medical professionals from around the world we live in, experts in the area of neurosurgery and traumatic brain injury, who had a mission that they had established amongst themselves. And that was, let's get recognition that traumatic brain injury deserves attention in and of itself, and that the World Health Organization is the organization that can help achieve that on the world stage. Because traumatic brain injury is one of the leading causes in the world we live in of death and of injury or of effects. And therefore, it deserves to have that attention. And until now, it has not gotten distinct attention within our World Health Organization. And therefore, the mission was laid out or developed, and I became part of it because of my experience, because of my global experience and activity that had occurred, and my ability to interact on the world stage that I had been doing for my entire career. It was just a
Yeah.
proper link to get me associated with it, and it was something that got my attention in a large way. So what we are progressing and proceeding with is to get the World Health Organization to recognize traumatic brain injury, and here's the key, as a chronic and notifiable condition. And by using that word chronic, it puts in place the need for member states to adopt their own mechanisms for surveillance, for diagnosis, for treatment of
Wow.
traumatic brain
Yeah.
injury. It had been, I won't say it would have been ignored by the World Health Organization, but it had been mentioned more. There had been other resolutions related to neurological disorder, related to epilepsy, for example, which
Okay.
had been treated distinctly, and maybe traumatic brain injury, which is one of the primary causes of epilepsy, was a footnote or was mentioned. But there was
Okay.
not a separate identification of traumatic brain injury as a condition that needs to be recognized as such and treated as such. And so that is what has been undertaken. The World Health Organization, it's in the form of the World Health Assembly, meets every year in May in Geneva. And we have submitted a resolution for adoption. We were unsuccessful in getting it on the agenda of the World Health Assembly for this coming May, but our objective now is to have it on that agenda for next May, 2027. And we do have member states, which is necessary in the World Health Organization, to have a member state who has taken the role of formal sponsor and made the submission. The Ministry of Health in Pakistan has done that and agreed. So it's all a matter of coordinating efforts to be able to proceed with that and ultimately get the World Health Organization to adopt such a resolution. That leads to international cooperation. In fact, it's a requirement to have international cooperation when such a resolution can be passed by the World Health Organization. When I learned about this initiative, I thought this is something I would like to be involved with, and I made myself involved with it. The one assignment I have from the coalition group is, as a person with lived experience, to lead the participation in this effort of people with lived experience, people who can be able to convey directly these messages from their experiences directly to member states, directly to representatives and other important elements. And that's why coming this May even, we have a side event at the World Health Assembly that we have invited a number of member states to attend. And a key part of that is going to be a panel discussion by people with lived experience who can directly convey. And this is how you connect with the audience, because as we all are, I'm sure, familiar, many people have some experience one way or another with traumatic brain injury. Even if it didn't occur to them, they know of others, loved ones perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the strategy, and that's how we're going to do it. And so the efforts are underway, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to be part of it.
Thank you so much for sharing about this. So, these conversations are currently happening, and it's so important to be able to talk about this and to be able to bring it to the light. And so, what is the resolution, or what are you trying to get passed?
A resolution has been submitted by the Ministry of Health of Pakistan to the World Health Organization. So it's been written, it's been agreed as to what it
Okay.
should look like. It is, I guess, to highlight much of what I said, it lays out the reason why traumatic brain injury should be identified in and of itself as a condition which requires coordination,
Got it.
surveillance, treatment amongst the member states. So we start with statistics like I touched on about the importance of traumatic brain injury in the world we live in, and how common it is and what it can lead to, and the lack of attention that it is receiving. Now, we in the United States have the good fortune of being a prosperous place and have advanced medical facilities and treatments, although we're the first ones to say there's much to be done even here in this area. But compared to low-income states, low and medium income states, where the majority of the world lives and works, there in those locations, there is not the attention nearly to the degree that there can be and should be. And it's why you turn to the World Health Organization, because there are 134 member states, each of which take on a responsibility to deal with this. And so that's one of the primary objectives, is to get a more even addressing of this condition in the world we live in. And one of the things, the other thing I guess I'm contributing, is one of our tools that we're going to use, even coming up here in May, is a storybook. A storybook that is made up of testimonials from people with lived experience, both those who incurred the experience and caregivers from around the world we live in. So we have testimonials that have been provided from the Philippines, from India, from Africa, from Latin America, because that is the nature of the condition we're talking about here that needs to be dealt with. And I will certainly make it very much available to anybody who's interested at the time that we finally are ready for publication. But that's our target.
Thank you. We would love to see it at Hope Survives, and I hope that you continue to send us updates. I would love to keep reaching out and stay in contact as these things move forward. And you're so right that it affects everyone, right? We talk a lot about how brain injury can happen to anyone, anytime, any place, because it's an injury. And so it's affecting people all over the world. And there is not a standardization of care. And so this would make a huge difference if the World Health Organization would recognize brain injury. And so thank you for your efforts on behalf of myself and the entire community, the Hope Survives community. We thank you for your efforts, and we thank you for sharing a glimpse of that with us today. We wish you the best of luck at the assembly coming up here in May. And I look forward to hearing about it. And it's exciting that you know it's on the docket for 2027.
Yep, but we still have a ways to go.
Yes,
Plenty of
quite
work
a
to be
ways to
done.
go. So we are reaching towards the end of our time here for today's podcast, but we always ask our podcast guests, what are your final words of hope for our listeners?
I'll say it again. It is the power of positive thinking. It is the recognition that things could be worse than what they actually are. Again, not to say they are miraculously the same. In many cases, they are not and won't be. But I think that mindset is the key to managing the uncertainty that comes with it. I think the other key message is that there's a recognition that traumatic brain injury is a chronic condition, is a condition that affects those who incur it or who are part of caregivers who are associated with it, can affect them for ever. And that's the nature of it. And it's the new normal that needs to be dealt with and can be dealt with. I'm one level of proof of that, but there are many, many others out there. Each individual who's listening to this can probably attest to the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for being on the podcast today. For those listening, if you have any further questions, you can reach out to our team, hi@hopesurvives.org. And of course, as always, we'd be happy to pass anything along. Thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing more as things continue to move forward.
Okay, I will happy to do that.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, we would love if you would consider leaving us a rating or a review. We are so grateful to be able to provide this support for the brain injury community. And if you would like to get connected, please visit hopesurvives.org.